Hi, I'm Dan Danford. We're doing a series of podcasts called Money Made Easy for the website dadsdivorce.com. We look at either an issue of current interest in finance or a question that's been forwarded to us from one of the visitors to the website. We have a question today, a very good question. I'd like to buy a home, but I basically have no savings. I do have an inheritance of $25,000 that can only be used for a down payment. But other than that, I have no safety net. I could probably afford about $1,000 per month mortgage. Do you suggest I try and purchase a home even though I have no savings outside the down payment? I'm sick of renting and essentially throwing my money away when I have this huge inheritance gift just sitting there. Well, if you've watched other podcasts, you know that I'm a strong proponent of owning a home. But what I want to probably prompt you is to use some caution as you think about this. Owning a home is far more than just making a mortgage payment each month. And I know you think you can afford $1,000 a month, but a real key issue is what's included in that $1,000. Most people who rent sort of underappreciate the various costs that are involved in home ownership. For your rent, you probably get free maintenance, you get maybe some of your utilities paid. There could be other expenses that are covered. Maybe trash hauling is covered. Almost always taxes are covered. You don't have to pay any kind of taxes or anything. And again, there are just a whole list of things that go along with home ownership. Insurance is another subject. Most of us, if we rent, we pay renter's insurance, which is a relatively small amount each year. If you own a home, the insurance is typically far more than that. So these are just a little kind of preview. If you think that $1,000 a month you can afford, the truth is probably only part of that can be devoted to the mortgage. The other things go along with it. You need to make sure you've got enough to cover all those things. Having said all that, owning a home is a very good thing. One of the reasons why it's a good thing is because if you use your $25,000 as a down payment, you're using somebody else's money to pay the rest of the house. And then over time, you're going to pay off the loan plus interest to them. That's called leverage. And when things work well, leverage is a very good thing financially. In fact, owning a home is one of the few places where normal people get to use leverage. Businesses use it all the time, but there aren't a lot of opportunities for people in their homes and their families to use leverage. So this is a really good opportunity. The other side of that, of course, is that when things get tough and you can't make the mortgage payment, then leverage is a double-edged sword. And you can lose not only what you've put into the house, but everything else that goes along with that if you can't make the mortgage payments. So I just want to encourage you to look into buying a home, but to use a bit of caution before you step out there. One more point that I'll make about real estate that people don't think about, but people talk about spending their money. They say, well, I hate to spend a bunch of money on a house. But this isn't money you're throwing away. I mean, you aren't spending it in the sense that you go spend money for a night out and it's gone forever. When you take $25,000 and you put it into a house, if you've made good choices, you'll get that $25,000 back later on down the road. And if you've made really good choices, that $25,000 will multiply over time. So just because you spent the money, what you've really done is you've invested the money in a home instead of something else. That's a real key point that a lot of people don't get. So here are my observations that might be helpful as you consider this. First of all, that $1,000 a month you think you can expend, I think you need to be very cautious about that. Maybe that number is closer to $700 or $800 that you can afford on principal and interest, with another $300 going to utilities, going to taxes, going to maintenance, going to insurance that you don't have today. But if you feel confident that you can make those payments and all the costs that go along with it, then I think buying a house could be a good choice for you. The second point that I'll make is that it makes a huge difference where you buy the house. And I'm going to suggest to you that you do some studying before you buy. A lot of people make the mistake of just going out and finding the least expensive house they can find. But in real estate, the cost of the house has a lot to do with factors beyond just what's cheapest. It has to do with location. It has to do with the quality of the neighborhood. It has to do with the quality of the schools. There are all kinds of things. And typically, if we find a house that's selling for not very much money, there may be reasons why that's the case. Now, I'm going to tell you to kind of study neighborhoods in advance, and I'm also going to tell you to get good professional help. Now, when it comes to working with a real estate agent, there is a distinction that I'll point out to you. Most real estate agents work for the seller. Okay? Nothing wrong with that as long as you understand that. What that means is they've been hired by the seller to sell the property. They're going to look out after the seller's best interest instead of yours. Now, the way to change that dynamic is to use what's called a buyer's agent. A buyer's agent, as it says, they represent you, the buyer, and they have a responsibility to you rather than to the seller of the house. Doesn't cost any more. In most cases, the cost will be exactly the same either way, but having a buyer's agent means that you have a professional that's looking out for you. They will help you find the best value, not necessarily the cheapest price, but the best value in purchasing a home. And if you make a good choice, generally speaking, a good house in a good neighborhood is always a good investment. So if you make a good choice, then your investment will multiply over time. Last thing I'm going to suggest to you, and this sounds a little counterintuitive maybe, but that is that you should find homes in neighborhoods where there are lots of homes on the market. All that means is that when you finally get ready to sell this house, you may think you're going to live there for the rest of your life, but that would be uncommon. The average person moves every 6 to 7 years in the United States. So even if you stay longer than the next guy, I'm still going to say you're probably going to be in this house for 10 years or less. Okay? If you're in a neighborhood where there are houses in the market all the time, where you see signs in the neighborhood, that means that there's a lot of liquidity in the marketplace. People are moving into that neighborhood and out of that neighborhood all the time. And what that means to you is when you put a sign in the front yard, you probably won't have to wait as long before somebody buys that house from you. That's another key point, because when you decide to move, maybe you've bought another house, maybe you've decided that for financial reasons you have something else that you'd rather do, or go someplace else, or take a different job. You don't want to have to sit on that house for 8 months or a year and a half getting it sold. You want to be able to put a sign in the yard and within a reasonable period of time get a good price for the house. That happens in neighborhoods that have a lot of folks coming in and out of them. So those are my 3 observations, 3 things I'd point out to you. Number 1, make sure that you've got enough money to make the payments and all the associated costs that go along with that. Number 2, locate a good neighborhood where you'll get good value for the dollars you spend. And number 3, go to a neighborhood where you see houses changing hands on a fairly rapid basis. If you'll do those 3 things, then I think taking your $25,000 inheritance and putting it into a house will be a good choice for you. Until those 3 criteria are met, however, I think that you should be very cautious in buying a house, because buying a house involves a big mortgage, and you'll have to make those payments. And if you can't make those payments, you'll be in trouble in quick time. Okay? So that's it for another week of Money Made Easy for Dad's Divorce. I'll see you next week. Thanks.